Hi, I'm Luke,
Hi, I'm Michael.
and this is our podcast.
So today we're going to talk about Antifa. We're going to talk about both why it matters, what it really is, what it stands by, and a little bit about where it came from maybe, and then also what it might become and what it means for future both of in the U.S. and Europe.
Okay, so do you want to start or do you want me to start?
I guess I can start.
Okay.
So, to look at Antifa, we have to see what it really is about.
Mm-hmm.
It appears to be some sort of anarcho-communist, ideology, at least surrounding it.
Yeah.
I tried to dig a little deeper into that. It does match a lot of the type of actions that you'd see from older anarchist groups. They turn to violence as their means of protest. Groups back then were maybe a little more radical. They had tried to assassinate presidents, but there was a general fear about it, and they were communist.
Mm-hmm.
If that's the group today, I don't think so. I know we did. If you want, we can talk about. We did a little anecdotal research on Antifa. We went on Reddit.
Mm-hmm.
We
r/anarchism 101, r/anarchism, r/debate anarchism. And, we just wanted to kind of find out what these people were about. Just looking on it online, it doesn't really give a clear answer, but so I just thought we'd go straight to the source, because on r/anarchism and the associated subreddits, the members of Antifa often do accumulate there. So
read some of the quotes.
Yeah. So I asked them the end goal of Antifa, that's the title, and I said, with all the riots and protests in Berkeley, and especially in Paris today with the May Day parade, what is the intended end goal? For instance, is the intention in France to intimidate people to not vote for Le Pen, or is there a long-term goal in an anarchist state of affairs? Okay, and so one of these guys, who's named himself Socialism One, said the goal of Antifa, anti-fascist, is to oppose fascism. It's in the name, but Antifa is largely comprised of anarchists, so the end goal outside of Antifa is anarchy. Yes. So I retorted, what are they doing in France or Germany then? There are already enormous social stigmas and laws against fascism/Nazism. Also, why not attack Capitol buildings and other government buildings as opposed to universities like Berkeley? And he said, I don't know much about the movement in France or Germany, so I can't help there. And as in regards to the whole Capitol buildings, attacking them, he said, nobody attacked the University of Berkeley. They counter-protested against the white supremacists who organized there. Then I said, but they did damage the university's buildings themselves, so I saw it as an attack. If it was a simple counter-protest, the windows wouldn't have been smashed. But about these white supremacists, who specifically are they, and what do they advocate for? Do they actively support white supremacy, or do they support white supremacy in a more reserved way, such as, you want to restrict immigration, but it's mostly because you hate Mexicans? And then he links me to a couple organizations I think are in the U.S. or Europe. One's called Proud Boys, another one's called Identity Europa with a V. And he says, one cannot commit violence towards property. Breaking windows of a university, a coffee shop, or other private property is simply a means of action against capitalist corporations. The only way to, quote-unquote, speak to a company is by impacting its ability to grow capital. This is evidenced by trying to convince a corporation to act in the best interest of the people. There is no way to do so unless it is in their financial interests.
See, and I think this is interesting too, because, when you think of the general Antifa member, it's usually someone who's relatively uneducated, probably doesn't know much about, probably hasn't read Marx even, probably doesn't know much about how communism's been employed, probably doesn't know even the idealistic tenets of it.
Yeah.
Now, this guy certainly, I think, is educated, and I think he's attempting to defend what the purpose of this group is and try to define it.
Yes.
But, that last line you're just reading about,
Uh-huh.
when he's talking about, fighting against capitalism,
Like,
essentially saying, like the stuff fighting against the bourgeoisie. Those are not the terms you see being said by people at the rallies. That's not what they're fighting about.
No.
It's usually some sort of race-based argument that really doesn't hold any water. It really doesn't make any sense.
Right.
And maybe that's okay, but his point might be okay.
Maybe.
But if that was really their purpose, at least, then it'd be going back to some sort of classical anarcho-communist movement. But I do not think this is that. I don't think it's as nuanced as that.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is all just part of the more general populist trend, where it's we want to gang up against somebody else, like an in-group, out-group dynamic. That's all it's about, really.
Right. Also, this whole thing, this whole line of thinking doesn't make sense to me, really. I said that I thought it was an attack against University of Berkeley, but he says you can't commit violence towards property, but then he says the only way to speak is to impact its ability to grow capital, and in this way it's through violence. So it's kind of contradictory in a way, and also to say you can't I guess he just kind of misses the whole point. You can attack a building, you can attack a university, physically, but that affects the people behind the boards. That affects the people behind it. That affects the students. That affects everyone else.
But see, I think you're right, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this guy is an intellectual, or at least somebody who's read actual, socialist and communist, anarchical or not, works.
Right. Uh-huh.
And he's trying to apply that. That's why he's sending you sources and stuff. That's not the Antifa supporter. This is not what they stand by.
No.
If you ask them that question, maybe they would say they aren't committing violence, but they wouldn't base it on Marxist readings, even if they are claimed to be somewhat Marxist, and you see people walking around with Soviet flags, North Korean flags, which first of all are so divergent and
they're so different
versions of communism that it really isn't.
That kind of proves that they're not very educated about that sort of thing.
I think that is a point. I think that the both people that you see fighting there are uneducated, but they're politically motivated. And I think that's a problem. With democracies, it's either they're politically motivated and they are somewhat educated and they're trying to fight for a specific goal. If we want to talk about proper protests, we can look at the suffragettes or something, which they would act in a similar way, maybe not in the turning into riots like this.
Yeah.
But they would do actual peaceful protests to achieve a clear goal that was backed up by a legitimate ideology that people could support, and there was clear tenets of liberalism that apply to what the suffragettes were fighting for.
Right,
so
of course.
It made some sort of logical sense.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the same thing is true with Martin Luther.
Oh, yeah.
And his peaceful protests. People can poke holes in him and say sometimes it's not peaceful, but that's
for the most part.
The conversation of whether purely peaceful protest is the best way to do it, or maybe you need a little violence to raise awareness, that's a whole nother thing, talking about how movements can be potent. But
right.
I think for the point with Antifa is that it doesn't matter how potent they are. It doesn't matter really what their strategy is, because they don't have an end goal that we can really do. If I'm a policymaker and I want to stop Antifa, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to be a fascist myself and ban anyone who's remotely right wing because Antifa would deem them a fascist? I don't know what the goal is here.
Right.
So
yeah, and there was a lot of confusion about that regarding this anecdotal thing. I asked a bunch of people, and they said, they don't have a real clear end goal in sight. They just want to oppose fascism, whatever that means. So it's well, okay, but how do you oppose fascism? How are you going to stop them from voting? How are you going to stop their political parties? You can't just hold protests and expect that to work every time.
And and I think this that whole it's almost like a myth that they rely on. If you see anybody talking to them in the streets, if you do it yourself, or even on Reddit, you're seeing here, these people will say, we're out here and they'll either say that like the government is promoting fascist laws or something.
Right, Trump.
Yeah, or there's fascist people in the government. Or the other thing which they almost all will say is that they try to like defend the violence that comes out of what they're doing by saying like like we didn't start it. Like there was fascist movements out there before us, that were oppressing minorities. And I'm not, whether that's true or not, it's not.
Yeah.
But and even if there are in some places, that's they have there's no actual evidence that they can substantiate that claim up with.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that goes back to when we think about times where both populism and like extreme irrational groups are formed, we have to go back to what the time they love to talk about actually, which is like 1930s Europe and America to an extent. And I think there you can see that like these groups were very divided, super polarized.
Yeah.
Both the brown shirts of the fascists and the militant militant groups of socialist and communist groups. And like in between was like in Germany, there was like the small, very small unheard voices and pretty much irrelevant voices after the end of the decade of like the democratic groups and the more traditionalist monarchist groups in Germany. And I think we're seeing a lot of that today. I think we're seeing a lot of this people that just used to vote for the establishment, used to use somewhat rational thinking in their decisions, both in the liberal and the conservative side, kind of becoming overshadowed by these more radical movements.
Yeah.
Like I think like the whole concept of the silent majority is kind of changing. And and I think there's two waves. There's two times I think of when I think of the populist waves. Like I think of that time, which ends in the populists winning, these extremist groups actually attaining some sort of power or deconstructing power, if you want to talk about the Bolsheviks. And
sure.
And both that obviously led to the catastrophic World War II situation. But then I do think there is a way to come out of this, and I think when you look at the wave of populism that kind of happened in the U.S., like when with William Jennings Bryan, stuff like that, where, back then the populism was much more regionalized. It wasn't as widespread, but I think you can argue that it's somewhat regionalized. Like, where we live in Phoenix, it's not even a big problem, even though we're sixth largest metropolitan city in the U.S. But, you don't see Antifa out in the Midwest. You really don't see them in many places besides like very traditionally liberal college campuses and states, like California, New York City. Right. Like areas like that. So I think you could make the argument that this wave could pass. Yeah. I guess that's the question I pose to you now. Like, do you think that it's going to be like the 30s, that we're the trajectory of our country, that, we're going to see democracy threatened or our democracy relatively changed? We're going to see worse politics from both sides, whoever's in power? Or do you think this wave's kind of going to die down and we're going to go back to the way it was with, just more of like the establishment, more people maybe a little less, the average young voter maybe a little, again, more disconnected from politics, but maybe in a healthier way? What do you think?
I want to be kind of optimistic here and say that democracy, at least in the United States, isn't threatened. Like you said, it's mostly just these metropolitan areas that are usually very liberal, and although they are, very liberal there, it doesn't affect the Midwest. It doesn't affect even here in Phoenix. It doesn't affect all those other places. And, once they do start becoming a threat, like, policemen and, like, the National Guard and even citizens are going to start opposing it, like, at a almost violent way. So I guess that does kind of lead to the next question, like, is this going to see like the 1930s like rise in violence on both sides? Like, are we going to start seeing alt-right Trump supporters with guns fighting Antifa with guns? Like, who knows? I doubt that's going to happen because, like, both of those groups, both Antifa and the alt-right, they're so dwarfed compared to like the political establishment, compared to the silent majority, compared to all this. So like, and also there's the threat, especially on the alt-right who don't wear masks, of like being caught and being thrown in jail for nothing. And and then there's this whole thing of like, well, if these gun-toting guys are starting to go to war and the police aren't going to do anything about it, why would I want to get involved? Like, I don't know how to fire a gun. I don't know how to do this, blah, 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 blah. So I don't really see it threatening democracy. And I kind of see it passing at some point because,
Okay.
I saw a study the other day. I don't remember which one it was, but like younger people are far less likely to vote than the older people, of course, which it's a trend we've seen, but they are almost twice as likely to participate in a protest. And so they're starting to feel a little disenfranchised and with the political establishment. But with the rise of Generation Z, especially, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they're like the most conservative generation since like the 40s, since like World War II. And I can totally see these kids who like support Trump almost like to a huge extent, who are conservative, right-leaning libertarians. I can see them just coming in and completely pushing the millennials aside, pushing Antifa aside, and going, "Look, don't fuck with us. Like we're going to take over now." I don't see it happen. I don't see Antifa gaining any traction. I don't even see it really resorting to violence much more than fistfights. I guess it's possible to go to gun violence, but I don't really see that happening either. Because let's face it, like if you have an extreme anti-gun, extreme left-wing group, then they're not going to know how to fire guns, where the pro-gun right-leaning ones are.
So if I have to play devil's advocate to
Yes,
that, 'cause I don't think
please.
you're necessarily wrong, but I do think, first of all, about the last point you were talking about, that
Generation
they
Z.
aren't going. Well, that and the more the general point that you're saying that they're not going to have their violence isn't intense enough to ever result in like any sort of fall of democracy in the U.S. They don't stand a chance of overthrowing the U.S. I think that's absolutely true. But if I have to go back, if I'm going to open up the history book,
Okay.
I'm going to say that that metaphorical history book. I'd say you got to look at the transformation of the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire.
Okay, that's going far back.
It is, but I think
It applies.
It
It
applies
applies,
very well.
right.
Rome, kind of the city upon a hill. That was the idea that America was founded on. That we're unique. We were very structured. They cared a lot about citizenship. They were very civic Republican, like we were founded on. Same principles. But through the 500 years that republic lasted, mind you, we're only at what, like 250-ish almost?
Oh, not even.
Not even.
Not
Yeah,
even.
Exactly. Not even that long. So we're about half the length of that.
Of the Romans, yeah.
Well, then that's just the republic. But in that time, you see growing through that time, whether it's the Gracchi brothers, with Marian reforms, in every way, the country, as it gets bigger, becomes more and more populist. The two parties in Rome, a lot of people don't realize this, were called the Populares and the Optimates. And the Populares were, as it sounds, basically the popular ones, like the people that the ones that used public support to kind of get their office. And then the Optimates were the ones with the more noble backgrounds, the ones, often served in the Senate, the ones that, relied more on the traditional aspects of their heritage in both of Rome to get to power. And you'll see the Populares just dominate, like whether it's Caesar, Pompey, all these people in the triumvirates, and they grow and grow and gain so much power that after a while, they're not even a republic anymore. And eventually the most popular guy at the end of it all, Augustus, says, we're still technically a republic, but I'm an emperor.
Yeah.
And and there is almost like a peaceful transition, I guess, to an empire because people loved him. People thought he never said that it was officially not a republic. They still kept a lot of the aspects of the republic, and they kept the virtues the same. They kept many of the laws the same. They kept the constitution, but it didn't have any real meaning because they had switched. And I think we have definitely, it's undeniable to say that the executive has grown more power through our history, and it's only growing exponentially. So, and we already have Trump, who definitely, I wouldn't say is a constitutionalist. He definitely represents populism in the way that he does. He really wants to, do things for the people,
right?
And that type of language is inherently not really traditionalist.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that we already are in that transformation. Of course, we can survive that and still remain a democracy. I'm not ruling that out. But I think it's important to look at that and be like, it doesn't have to be a violent overthrow, or there doesn't even have to be violence involved in order for us to like basically lose our Republican democracy status.
Yeah, we were close with FDR, like basically becoming a elected
Well,
king.
sure. I mean,
or
yeah,
whatever.
exactly. I mean, the wartime only accentuates it. So if there's a war, it's untold what could happen during that. I mean, for a lot of reasons. But I do agree. I don't know if Antifa has that aspect, but I do think the general trend of populism could definitely spiral out of control and go that way.
Possibly. I guess the founders tried to fight that by having the Second Amendment, fight against tyranny and all that. But, who knows if that'll work in the end. Maybe it might not even come to violence, like you said.
Exactly.
Like the elected person could just be so popular that he's like, you know what, screw it, I'm going to be president for life. And then that's it.
And so I think we can both agree that we don't think Antifa is a real threat.
Yeah, I don't think so.
But, like going along with this just for a little longer, what kind of group, what kind of ideology do you think is next in line? And is maybe going to take it a step further down the road?
I mean, that's hard to say. I don't know who will who do you mean? Like, do you mean we'll take Antifa's place as like the radicals?
Yeah, because I think when we look at this, I think we have to look at like the Tea Party and as for the right wing, and then the Occupy Wall Street movement
for the
as the left wing. And I think like Black Lives Matter, Antifa, the alt-right, these type of groups are like the progeny of those groups. And I think that like we're only going to see this populism continue. I mean, looking at the Democrats right now, like sure Chuck Schumer goes on CNN a lot, but really the people that our age and the people that are exciting to people are Bernie from his campaign, obviously,
Warren,
and
Elizabeth
Warren.
Uh-huh.
And I think those are the two people, like when you look at it, that are really popular, and they're both populist. And I think I think this trend's just going to continue. So I guess what I'm asking is like, I don't think this anarchic sort of vague ideology is going to last, but which one do you think is going to take them over? I mean, it's up to you. Like, just speculation here.
Yeah, one that I think will kind of be like Antifa in that it just kind of appears a little while and then just kind of fades away. Like, just in terms of that, I think it'll be actually more right-leaning. Like, I think anarcho-capitalism will start to take hold. Like, people will start looking, especially with Generation Z, they seem to be falling more in line with the conservative way, so they're going to be pushed more towards the Ayn Rand and that sort of thing. Then they'll start to become like more, so libertarian that it gets to the point where they're anarcho-capitalists. So that's like one thing I see happening, but I don't see that getting any traction.
Okay.
But as far as like the Democratic Party, like, I do see this. Well, it's hard to tell because even though Bernie, like, does have a big foothold, people were quick to ditch him almost immediately when Hillary became the primary candidate of the Democrats. Like,
I mean, I think that's not necessarily true. I mean, you look at some of the states that Bernie won in the primaries, like basically the Midwest states, Michigan, Ohio, and stuff. And he won in those states against Hillary, and he wasn't supposed to.
Yes.
The polls said that he wasn't going to win, and just like the polls,
98% chance to lose. Right.
It switched over as well to go to Trump, and I think to say that all those voters. I mean, there's two theories. It's either those Democratic voters didn't show up or they voted for Trump because they liked Bernie more.
Yeah.
So I think there is that dynamic. I don't think they're gone.
That's fair.
I think they're powerful. Maybe Bernie's too old, but even if it's not Bernie or Elizabeth Warren, they still have 4 years for somebody else to come up. And, I think that there definitely will be somebody else who comes up to rival Trump on a populist front. Because that's really the best way to get back those states that they lost, is they need to get those people that care about the economic issues, those people that want their jobs back, and they need to bring them back to the Democratic Party. And I think they know that now. I think it's painfully obvious that's why they lost, because they lost that base. So I'm sure they'll do everything they can as long as the party the whole bureaucracy of the party doesn't meddle with it again.
Yeah.
Like if they choose Chelsea Clinton, that's a disaster.
Oh, that's it.
But anyway,
Yeah.
back to the topic.
Right.
With Antifa.
Uh-huh.
I guess, I mean, I know we were talking about this, but do you really think they can't get more radicalized? Because, I mean, I think we are underestimating them a little bit. They're still very new. They're still very fresh. They still really only come up. I mean, the fact that they're international already
that's
is actually a pretty huge move. I mean, like Black Lives Matter, I mean, sure, it's because
it's in
US,
Britain, but no one cares
it's
about
almost
it there.
entirely in the U.S.,
Yeah.
and, they don't really have, like, an international platform. And like you were saying, the mayor of Berkeley kind of supports them. You can go into that a little bit.
Yeah, I'll go into that just to,
Yeah, sure, go for it.
Just right now, just to quickly get out of the way. I don't know his name, but the mayor of Berkeley, they found out he was directly tied to the policemen not getting involved in the Berkeley riots and the big fights between the Trump supporters and the Antifa people, and also with the University of Berkeley. And they found that he was directly tied to a group called By Any Means Necessary, which is shortened to BAM. BAM? I don't know, but basically they found that he was Facebook friends with like the leader of By Any Means Necessary, and he is a part of the Facebook group. So he's obviously got this sort of thing, for Antifa. He's got this whole he's obviously affiliated with By Any Means Necessary. And when pressed on it, he kind of avoided it. He said, well, you're just being racist. You wouldn't ask a white man this question because I'm a Latino. And so obviously he's trying to avoid the question. He knows he's guilty. But you're right. It seems to be a bit of support.
Yeah, so, I think that the fact that they have both international platform, their movement spreads internationally, at least in Europe and in Western countries.
Uh-huh.
And the fact that there's at least some sort of, even if it's just local governments like mayors. I think I've heard about, I don't know if it was a Swedish mayor, it might have even been like a Swedish foreign minister or somebody important, his daughter was in it. But, I think they have some sort of government connection that lets them do what they want without getting completely shut down.
Mm-hmm.
And, the fact that the mainstream media either supports them or doesn't really talk about what happens.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if that's... Like, I think that gives their movement more time to grow, and I don't think we should just cut it off as being over yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, same here.
So, do you think... So, I guess that begs the question, like, if they really are true to, like, maybe what these more educated people on Reddit are saying about the movement, do you think it's true that their goal really will transform into, like, being anti-bourgeoisie, and do you think they're going to start attacking like banks, and then maybe they'll eventually attack the Capitol building once they have enough strength? And do you think that maybe they'll try to, like, because obviously they can't run for elections because that'd be against what they stand for. But
exactly.
So do you really think they're going to go full out radical? Maybe
bombs.
Maybe they will become more domestic terrorists over time. I mean, I guess that depends on if they find a leader.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I don't know. Like, I think what they're going to have to do first is find, like, an actual goal. Like, is their goal to just oppose fascism, or is it to, get rid of the current state of government, impose an anarcho-communist or anarchist state of government? Like, they need to figure that out first before they can really make big moves like that, because no one wants to risk their life for something that really doesn't have a huge cause or purpose behind it. Like, unless that bank is like a Nazi bank, then you're definitely not going to bomb it because you put yourself at risk. But man, that's a good question, and I didn't consider that.
Well, I mean, I will say this, like, I think that they really do need to get more of a direction, because, like, if they start having, like, specific, like, points that they're criticizing about the government, I think that could reach more people potentially. I don't know. I think if, like, Bernie or somebody like that actually supported the movement or went to a rally, I think that would be interesting. I guess then here's another question. Do you think that Black Lives Matter is fading because of this? Do you think it's going to get lumped into this, or do you think it's going to be its own force still? Or, I mean, what is the future of that? Or is it going to be like the Occupy Wall Street when it kind of dies down and then just joins this whole... Because it's almost like this Antifa is really, in reality, is just like a mix of both Occupy Wall Street and Black Lives Matter, saying like everything's racist, everything's against the people.
Society itself is
economically and
sexist or whatever.
politically. Society's, like everything's trying to like. So you think it's all just going to join forces like that, or what do you think?
Well, aside from a couple people on Black Lives Matter who have like said things about Marx and opposing Antifa, I'll get to that a little later. But like, I think they are becoming like one big group. Like I looked at, like I noticed one thing the other day, and I'm like looking at all this Antifa stuff, and I thought, I haven't heard from Black Lives Matter in a while. I've seen a bunch of Black Lives Matter activists, like from The Guardian or that, who's that girl on MTV, like the girl with the black girl with the dreads or whatever. She's like Dear White Men or something.
Dear White People.
Something like that.
Yeah.
But like, these people are supporting Antifa. They're saying, no, violence is the answer. We've been sitting down for too long and now it's time to take up arms. And so I think it is like definitely appealing to all the Black Lives Matter people. Like, I mean, for one thing, Antifa would love to just kill police. Like, so, and then Black Lives Matter would be like, well, that's great. Like they're pigs in a blanket, fry them like bacon sort of thing. So I definitely think that is the case. But just in regards to the little, like...
Because, I do have to bring up another thing, because, whenever I hear people defending Black Lives Matter, first of all, they say, we have a clear goal.
Yes, totally.
We want to fix the criminal justice system. We don't want police brutality, things along that line. But then I think one of their biggest points, actually, is that they always try to distance themselves from violence. They always stress that they have peaceful protests. When in the Dallas shooting, when there was the one African-American guy who shot some cops, they distanced themselves completely from that. Because they said, that guy's not really part of Black Lives Matter. Maybe he is, but he's just a fringe group member who, maybe he claims to be part of the movement, but we don't have anything to do with violence. That's not us. And, so for them, prominent leaders, if you're right, if prominent Black Lives Matter leaders are actually defending Antifa and even supporting it, then that loses a lot of credibility for their movement. And I think it does lump it in, because that's their whole thing is that we're not because whenever anybody tried to criticize them for being violent, they would say no, like that's not us. We're just trying to peacefully protest. And if they support Antifa, which is clearly trying to incite violence. These aren't protests. I mean, these are taking the streets, marching, hitting cops, throwing firecrackers at them. There's no way you could argue that this is a movement built on peaceful protest. Yeah. So for them to take that stance, that's just radically different, I just have to say.
I think they're trying to have their cake and eat it too in that sense. Like those Black Lives Matter leaders are like, this group Antifa, they're the violent ones. They're the ones who are basically advocating for a lot of things we're advocating for, just saying it in a different way. They're the violent ones. Whenever violence happens, we can say, oh, he's not a part of Black Lives Matter. He's a part of Antifa. Meanwhile, we Black Lives Matter people, we got these goals, but we're going to peacefully protest. So maybe they're doing it to like, make themselves look better in a way, possibly. But, just this whole them supporting them, I think it does lump it in with them, but I think they see it differently. Like, we're different. We're the peaceful ones, but, these people have a good cause, and as a result, we should respect them or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it will be interesting to see how that development goes. Like, if they officially, like, have Black Lives Matter members, like, saying, like, we're joining this Antifa protest, and, if they make it, like, official like that, or if it all just kind of blends together, and then we kind of just lose sight and it all becomes Antifa. That will be an interesting development. But, I think we do have to talk about the other side of the coin. I think we have to say, the reason Antifa protests do turn violent in the U.S., like Berkeley, and not just against police forces, like they do mostly in Europe, which is almost entirely against police forces. There are a bunch of people actively resisting them. There is physical opposition to them. And, you can argue who starts it, and I guess that is somewhat important. But, if you're showing up to Antifa, you're showing up for a fight. I don't... whoever starts it doesn't matter. If you're coming there, you're wearing your Make America Great Again hat, you're chanting
Donald Trump.
You're chanting things. You're trying to incite at least some sort of violence, whether it's like verbal abuse, whatever. You're trying to start a fight in some sort of way.
Yes.
So first of all, do you have any identification of like who those groups could be, and then also who do you think? What do you think of them? Do you think they're effective? Do you think they shouldn't be there? Do you think?
Well, as far as who they are, like, I know a lot of people say like they are, the Antifa and like those left-wing leaning people say like, oh, that's just a bunch of alt-right supporters and a bunch of neo-Nazis. But, just looking at the videos, you can clearly tell they're just like average guys who happen to be Trump supporters. Not all of them are even Trump supporters. A lot of them are like, disillusioned Democrats or liberals or classical liberals or something like that. At least from what I got from the video. Like, I remember in a video, an old man was giving a speech saying how, like, we need to preserve our freedom of speech. We need to preserve these things. And he says, we're not like those guys over there, those white nationalists. And they showed those guys, and it was obviously a pair of Nazis, doing the Hitler salute, wearing, like, a mask that was clearly fascist and Nazi. But like, so I think it's a bunch of normal people. And, as far as like how effective they are, like, is it good to have them fight back, or is it better to just have them, just sit on the sidelines and watch as Antifa does whatever they do, like they did with Berkeley or whatever, and watch them push them around? I can't really tell right now. Like, I'm leaning towards the whole, like, those Trump supporters being there to oppose them. They are making Antifa look bad. They're making them look weak. They're making them blah, blah, blah. But, on the same coin, it's like a person who would support Antifa, who wouldn't support it normally, but like ideologically fits in with them, would look at the Antifa getting their asses kicked and go, man, I really need to get involved.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and like, but on the other side of the on the other side of the coin, you could say that, man, these Trump supporters, they're just kicking everyone's ass. They're making Antifa look bad. I'm not going to get involved at all. So I guess it's just a matter of like, we'll have to see.
I mean, personally, I think both sides are guilty in this, because if I saw Hillary Clinton winning, I could see similar things happening with Trump voters doing their own version of Antifa.
Mm-hmm.
Saying like, we're against Hillary, we're marching. I mean, it's hard to predict. I'm not saying it'd go down the same way, but I think there would have been a lot of resistance. Because, a lot of people like to say that, in every other party, us Republicans have been so much more civil. But this was a totally fundamentally different election than anything we've had the past 10, 15, 20 years. So, I do think both sides are guilty. I do think the Trump voters do have to bear some responsibility, because these aren't people. At the Antifa protest, when they're protesting against people that are trying to speak, I give them a little more credit there. Mm-hmm. If you're going to speech and then a bunch of these protesters show up and disrupt the speech, you're already there. You're heated. Mm-hmm. Things happen. It's still not good, but it makes more sense. But I do think a lot of these ones, when they're marching in streets or whatever, just marching around in general, I think both sides are guilty. And I think the Trump people do have to bear a little bit of the blame for that, because I think these groups rely on all these YouTube videos and all these news reports about people getting punched, and people want to see that. Mm-hmm. It's that. Honestly, I think a lot of this comes down to, back to my Roman analogy, the whole bread and circuses thing. I think a lot of this is on both sides. People want to get energized. People want to feel it, especially now that the election's over. They got to wait 4 more years to vote and yell at candidates again. And they still have all this energy. Both sides do. Mm-hmm. And I think this is a way for them releasing it. It's not a good way. Mm-hmm. The more barbaric, the more base you get as a nation. I think that's a negative thing. I just think in general, this shows a general trend that's been happening for the last 50 years, and a decline of rhetoric, the decline of and all levels of society. You're supposed to be able to settle things with your words.
Right.
That's what democracy is based upon. We aren't a bunch of tribal clans trying to fight it out for supremacy. So. And at the same time, you're not supposed to have the government repressing you either. So I think that the balance is out of whack. I think there's the balance of power It's all over the place in the country. And I think Europe's starting to experience that because of the refugee reason. I think that's solely it. I think when you look at Europe, they're, all these social democratic and socialist regimes lost a lot of power and are losing power right now because, the people got all the social reforms. They got all the work hours they wanted. They got all the paid vacation hours they wanted. Everything is fine, and everything was great. And then, they pushed their agenda maybe a little too far when they let all those refugees in.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the problem with Europe. I think that their situation is different in that, like, I think Americans have been dissatisfied with their government generally in the way it works for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
I think with countries, that are trying, like in France and with Brexit and Britain, I think they're more directing that energy at the EU because of letting the refugees in more than at their individual countries, which I think is a different thing. But, it's interesting because they're both so populist.
Mm-hmm.
I'll let you take over for a little bit.
Okay, yeah. Well, yeah, I agree. Like, there is a lot of tension between all these people. There is a lot of animosity for sure, and people just want to kind of get rid of it. Like, me myself being a Trump supporter, I like to go on those videos and see like Antifa getting their ass kicked 2017 or whatever, and I like and favorite, hit the subscribe button, put that on my playlist, that sort of thing.
And you got to believe people on the other side are doing the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. So, but in my mind, in the back of my mind, I know, maybe this isn't right. Maybe this is just making things worse, and it very likely is. Like, I know like thinking about like history in Italy. There was, after World War II, between like the 60s and 80s, I believe, there was like what happened was a bunch of communists wanted to take over, so they started bombing metros and doing all this stuff and basically committing terrorism, and so people started to started to gravitate towards the fascists because they were being attacked by the communists. But then the fascists saw this as a way to promote their own ideology, so they started bombing metros and they started attacking people and they started attacking prime ministers and whatever. And then the public just became completely, the public hated both of them. If anything, it made them more centrist and made them like away from authoritarianism and more towards probably libertarianism. And so even though like Trump supporters aren't fascists, I could definitely see the same thing kind of happening. Like, if you voted for Trump because, you think he's a shakeup of the establishment and you want to bring jobs back or whatever, and they're really practical reasons, but let's say you used to vote Democrat, like you voted for Obama or something, like a lot of people did this election. Who voted Obama voted Trump this election.
Mm-hmm.
Like, if they're so easily swayed by things like that, then they could look at the violence and go, okay, well, I don't want to be affiliated with this. Like, I shouldn't have voted Republican, I should vote Democrat. Like, I could totally see this happening.
Yeah, and like, I think you're completely right. I liked how you like can self-reflect that, like, this is probably wrong.
Yeah.
But, and I think that goes back to the whole entertainment thing. I think we've become, in this country, so oriented around entertainment that everything has to be entertaining.
That's true,
We have to be constantly entertained all the time. Whether we're on our phones, like we got to be listening to music. If we're walking somewhere. Mm-hmm. If we're sitting in a room, we got to, like, be watching something on YouTube, And I think that's, like, I don't know if, like, I'm not going to be an old man and criticize technology because I don't think that in itself is the problem.
Right.
I think we just aren't using it in an applicable way. I mean, think about how many, like, things you could read, like history,
all of humans'
documents.
knowledge.
Everything is out there.
Everything.
On the internet. But instead, what do people go to? Do people go to JSTOR and look up research articles? Or do most people just go on, like, BuzzFeed and read, like, stupid articles? And, I'm not going to blame people. I mean, people have always wanted to be entertained. But I think when you combine a really powerful tool with, like, you give people this really powerful tool and then you and then they become all solely about entertaining themselves. That's when you see these type of movements come up.
Right.
Like when people try to like glorify like what's going on both sides. Like we're fighting the establishment as Antifa. You know, like they're like, we're fighting racism. We're gonna push down the government. We're not gonna let them oppress people. And, you know, and other people on the other side are, you know, they're just like, look at this guy, based stick man, beating up this skinny little liberal kid. Like, it's hilarious.
It is funny,
he's
admittedly.
Clueless, you know? I mean, like, I think that's, like, a very bad, like, showing of, like, decline of, like, how we find our entertainment. That we, you know, like, we don't find, like, you know, think about it. Back in the day, and I'm not saying everyone back in this day was educated, but, you know, like, people used to find, politically at least, people used to find, like, those debates between Frederick Douglass and, like, Lincoln, like, super reveling. You know, they'd draw, like, giant crowds in Illinois when they were doing that. And, you know, like, nowadays, it's so different. Like, people, like, if anything, if anything's popular from the debate, it's, like, some meme that comes out.
Right.
And, you know, like,
you
some
fake
soundbite of him saying
Uh-huh.
something, you know? And I think that's all part of this equation, you know? I mean, like, I think a lot of it's about that. Slogans. I mean, slogans have always been really powerful, but they're so powerful now. It's all just about making an image.
Right.
And, you know, I'm not saying that's necessarily a new trend, but I think technology has just brought it to a whole new level.
Social
than
media
anything else
especially.
I've ever seen.
Yeah, image I think is pretty much integral. Like there's a reason why Antifa has like the all black clad thing and, you know, look like they mean business. It's because if they dressed up like fucking, I don't know, like My Little Pony t-shirts or something like that, no one would take them seriously because that's not intimidating. So they need this intimidating image. That's why whenever you see like a really skinny person or like someone who looks like they've spent too much time in like a gender study class, you know, they have the hair, it's all that stuff, then that's why people make fun of them. You know, because it's like, look at their image. They're just a bunch of pussies. You know, let's make fun of them for that.
That is an interesting like aspect that I didn't really think about. You know, like the uniform really. First of all, that is very 30s.
Oh yes, absolutely.
Parallel, you know, brown shirts or black shirts or whatever you want to compare it to. But you know, it's also very, very like interesting that like, you know, they still embody those same things. That, like you're saying, the girl with the colorful hair or something in class may embody in the social justice class.
Right.
But they want to appear tough. You know, that's like, I do think
definitely.
That's interesting. Like, it's almost like there's some sort of, like, we need to appeal to a greater base, which, you know, makes them potentially more potent. Let's go deeper into the micro.
Okay.
Like, you know, let's really get the microscopic lens
on
this issue.
Yeah.
Let's look at, with the upcoming election in France, let's look at France.
Okay, perfect.
And so when we're looking at Le Pen versus Macron,
yes,
they already got a little taste of voting because with that dual election in France. So, you know, and then there's been the giant Paris march by Antifa today. May 1st.
May Day.
Yeah, on May Day. Do we, you know, I think it's a really interesting question. So, if Marine Le Pen wins, how intense do these protests get in France? And then also, if Marine Le Pen loses, Macron wins.
What
happens to these? What happens to these protesters? What happens to Antifa? Do they move on, or do they keep fighting in France? Because you know that will at least. I think it's an interesting question.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Let's just say that Marine Le Pen will win for this specific assumption. Like, so she wins. I do think this will be, you know, like there's already a trend of right-wing politics arising in Europe. Like it started with Brexit. What was the Geert from the Netherlands? Like he got a lot of support, and you know Merkel is like losing her traction. You know, basically there's a huge, and let's not even get to Greece, which is like the Golden Dawn fascism, but like. But like there's a trend of right-wing politics like winning in Europe, and so I think these leftist communist anarcho-communists are looking at this and getting like desperate. They're getting antsy. They're looking at this and they're going, "Shit, we're losing. We gotta pull out all stops. We gotta go for it." So I think if Marine Le Pen wins, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a riot. I don't know how effective it would be, because I think the state would be prepared to send in police almost immediately. But I could imagine people like fucking being torn from the streets who voted Le Pen and just beaten to death. Like, I could see this happening. I don't know if it will happen, but I don't know what to expect, really. But yeah, that's what I think would happen if Le Pen won. Like,
I mean,
what do
I
you
guess
think?
do you think they're gonna get radicalized, to do their own storming of the Bastille? Do you think they're really gonna, I don't know. I mean, I guess we will see.
Yeah, I suppose.
But I think we can definitely have some certainty that there would be increased violence, increased riots, increased amount of everything. Now, I do think the interesting question is what happens if Macron wins.
Yeah, that is an interesting one.
Because, I mean, obviously the movement's not going to stop doing what it's doing in the U.S. or Germany or anywhere else, because, that's obvious. But do they actually support Macron, or is it only this general idea of being anti-fascist at every level of government? Because, a lot of them will just complain that it's the ordinary people, or it's people that are all neo-Nazis on the streets that are doing this, and not just the government, but for whatever reason they're protesting the government, which, is illogical. But, so if they have that, that tinge of just total irrationality in them, do you think that's going to cause them to just continue to protest even if Macron wins? I mean, I don't know.
I wouldn't be surprised, honestly.
And I think so. Talking more about the Macron France, right now, currently, what do you think is their goal of rioting?
I asked more of these anarchists, and they said, I asked, what's the purpose of this whole rioting? And they're like, to intimidate people, to, make it so that they don't vote, or that these fascist, quote unquote fascist ideologies don't pop up in the first place. So Antifa is this whole anti-fascist thing. Their only goal is to fight fascism. But, but who's to say that they aren't going to take a preventative measure once they win, quote unquote? Now we're going to start rioting, and fighting anyone remotely far right or whatever.
Or just keep protesting, just because
keep
there's
protesting.
still far right racists in the country. And stuff.
Because apparently.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll see, though. I mean, that will be the first major win by the well, not really liberals, but I guess by the left. By the left.
Yeah.
Since this Antifa movement emerged, so we'll see. I mean, it could cause a good effect everywhere, but I mean, I doubt it will happen in the U.S. But
okay.
So I guess the next question is, we already said what they kind of are and how they don't really make sense. We already said, kind of discussed when they came about, what they came from, Occupy Wall Street, Black Lives Matter.
So the who then?
So I guess the who is, who are these people?
Well,
who, what is this base they're targeting? Besides, we already know it's the populist left, but are they going? Is their base going to get Is their base extending? Because I mean, I have to admit, these riots, I believe, in these places are much larger than anything Black Lives Matter had, and they're much more diverse amount of people, I guess is the word. There's a lot of older white people,
right?
A lot of it's dominated by mostly young white people, which is different than Black Lives Matter. So I don't know, what is causing these people to come out, and why are there so many of them, in your opinion?
In Europe, or I guess.
Your opinion.
Well,
sorry.
oh yeah. Just in general, this is a theory I agree with. It's that a lot of people have been saying that these people the Antifa is basically a bunch of students, a bunch of teachers who have basically been self-radicalized by their universities and by their professors, which makes sense, I think, because you look at that whole gender studies stereotype being part of Antifa, that makes sense, or sociology or something like that. You ask these people, they're like, yeah, I studied sociology, I studied gender studies, I studied this. There are very few like economics majors or anything like that, anything like STEM, anything like that. And one particular case that really stuck out to me was one of the viral videos about Antifa going around was this one where an Antifa member with a bike lock came and clocked an opposing person on the side of the head, caused him to bleed and get a concussion or whatever. And so 4chan of all places actually managed to look at the few clues he has on him, his backpack, his facial patterns, his facial hair, look at his face, and they managed to find out that this guy was a professor at one of the universities in California. He was the sociology professor who claimed that he wanted revolution, like on his professor bio. So it all made sense. And so, I mean, if you've got professors going around saying that, everything is racist, everything is sexist, blah, 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 anarchism and communism are the right way to go. I mean, they're professors, they've pretty much studied their whole lives, or at least a huge majority of their lives. So, it makes sense that they'd take a lot of students under their wing. It makes sense that a lot of people would follow them. So that's why I think, and it's all an echo chamber as well, because, you've got, even in ASU, which is slightly more conservative than most universities around the U.S., it's got a required cultural credit. You have to take history of African Americans, or you have to take a social justice class or something. You're not required to take an economics class here at ASU if you're, say, a gender studies major. So it doesn't go both ways.
That's an interesting point.
Yeah, so...
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think you're right in that there's, it's an echo chamber, and that makes people think, we need to go out and do something if we all believe this. What do we have to lose? And, it's obviously not a very developed thought. Mm-hmm. But I do think that you're right that the professors encourage it. But you do have to kind of question. Well, first of all, and that taking an economic class as a requirement, just like that, was definitely a great point. Because I do think, I was going to say at first that, I do think it's important to at least know some sort of cultural history of other groups in this country.
Yeah.
Because I don't think it's not a problem. I do think it is a problem. Mm-hmm. But I do think you're right that people, maybe if they had an economics class, if they understood anything in it, would certainly have a different, it would at least tinge their perspective with some sort of real world application. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think the biggest thing isn't the professors. I don't think it's...
You don't think it's students?
I don't think it's the students necessarily. I mean, I think the echo chamber is definitely a factor, but I think the echo chamber goes beyond professors.
Okay.
I think everything has kind of, whether it's the media, whether it's just people, like what you see on Twitter, what's popular on Twitter, what's trending on Facebook. I think that's what causes it. And I think somebody who's ever running that agenda, is what does this. Because it affects both, it radicalizes both sides of the aisle.
Yeah,
too.
Sure.
Because you either believe everything CNN says and what BuzzFeed says and what, now this videos on Facebook tell you, and you support that and you become radicalized in whoever their view that, the supposedly George Soros's stuff is funded. But, then there's the opposite side, which, you don't believe anything that anybody says.
If anything,
you don't
CNN
believe
says
any
anything.
stats by any reputable scientific places. You don't believe in global warming or anything like that. You don't believe, you don't take anything to be true because you just assume everything's a lie. And that's just, these actors have caused both this dynamic for both things, and that's what they don't understand. They both have radicalized the left and the right with their behavior of being so, partisan, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think going off of that, you have to look at just this is an anecdote of my own. I had made a comment on an Instagram post. And I had made a true comment,
Uh-huh.
a true statistical comment about Trump's increase. I think it was at the time it was a 432% rate of drone striking
Yes.
compared to Obama, and all I had commented was, Trump is even more intense and damaging with all these drone strikes.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't even go into my own personal opinion about how I think how drone strikes are effective, or if I think they're not effective for whatever reason. I didn't even get to go into that. And the first response I got from it was a woman.
Yes.
And she said, "Oh, you know that from your top secret information?" And I'm like, "No, this is all open source. I get all my information for the, for the group I work for in DC, and I get it all easily, just with Google alerts on the internet.
Yeah.
They're all just articles.
They're all just
they're
there.
like Al Jazeera or like a lot of them are Arab papers, but even Forbes and stuff post them.
Mm-hmm.
They make reports of public drone strikes, both CIA and military ones." And she just dismissed my article. She tried to embarrass me by making a post about it, and and it was just ridiculous to see the comments there. I mean, it was something insane too. It was like 200 comments on it, and almost all of them were like, "Idiot, liberal, snowflake, libtard, cuck." Idiot, you just get all of this, and there's probably about like 10 comments in those 200 that were like, "No, he's actually right," and it's like, or at least there were some educated critiques that I didn't even have made my argument fully. I was just saying a statistic, but they're saying like, yeah, well maybe the percentage is up right now, but it could drop later, or they're like, like the percentage is high, but like I do support drone strikes. I think they're really effective to get Al Qaeda targets and stuff, and like those comments. You can disagree with some of those, and some of them agreed with me, but either way, those comments were at least somewhat, structured and had some sort of real clear rhetoric to them. It had like at least some sort of developed argument. Everything else was just like, it was like I felt like she was just herding like a massive flock of sheep, and she'd just open the gate and be like, "Food time," and they'd all just come in and say the same phrase, and then just start eating, and just like I'm serious. It was just shocking to see that.
Uh-huh.
And you try to cite, and I would even try. I foolishly tried to defend myself and like would post the article and be like, this is the Council on Foreign Relations. This is this guy made this that, and they just didn't care. They don't want to look at it. They said fake news, all of that. and I'm not just like attacking Trump supporters here. I think the left would do the same thing.
Oh yeah.
And so, I just think people live in their own bubble. They think they're both right, and that's a major problem. And I think I think you can blame that all on the media and celebrities. And yes, they're predominantly left that have done that. But the point is they've radicalized both sides, so it affects both sides equally. I don't know how they're supposed to fix that now. But, I think there just needs to be a change up both in the government and the media. And I think we're seeing that anyway. I mean, traditional television, radio sources are getting threatened anyway by, like, YouTube, podcasts like us maybe.
Hell yeah, dude, up top.
But, it's exciting stuff to see what's going on right now. You have any comments here?
Well, I just got to say that. That's a funny story to me, but yeah, I totally see what you mean. Like, even me, like my stepdad, that is pretty much on the same political spectrum as mine. Maybe not as libertarian, but he's on the same as the right. And like I tell him something and he'll just dismiss it and say it's wrong or whatever. And even if I like try and back it up, even if I try and go through it logically, and at some point I just give up because he's just too adamant on his thing. But then on the same side, I've taken a gender and society class, is what it was called, for my cultural credit and my sociology credit, and it's the same sort of thing. You say like they'll say something like saying man up is harmful to the boy because to a boy because it's perpetuates male stereotypes and is about like that sort of thing. And then I say, well, can't you argue that it's like saying grow up? They have to face their things. They can't just cry about it. It's the same sort of thing.
I think you are totally right in what you're saying it, but at least like, I mean, I do have to say, at least with like the professors and things like that in the sociology realm or whatever like that. I mean, it's not always true, but I do think they at least try to like explain the logic behind what they're doing. So if they say like man up is bad, they don't just say like
it's just bad.
Like they don't just say man up is bad. Like you're racist if you say it, and then they don't explain.
Yeah,
it.
Exactly.
They at least like
they explained it. Right.
So you have to like you can disagree with that, and that's fine. You can disagree with lots of things. It's like I'm saying, but like I just was just totally shocked with like that type of like just like herd mindset.
Yeah,
that like
mob mentality.
Yeah, exactly, that mob mentality. And I mean that's definitely what you're seeing with this Antifa, right? I mean, it's got to be like one of your friends is politically active, or like you all believe in the same thing, you're on the same social justice major or whatever, and you just want to do something exciting and you want to do this. And so it's a little bit of the bread and circuses thing. It's a little bit of like the whole mob mentality. And I think, I mean, I know we were saying near in the beginning of the show, we were saying, we think that you were saying that you think this trend's going to die out. You think this populism's not going to die out.
Oh, man, I'm not sure now.
I mean, I'm telling you, I just don't. I think the more commercial everything gets, the more out of touch people can be with everybody else and like kind of just hold their own belief, and there's no real consequence if it's wrong for both sides. I think that's going to just lead to people totally dismissing the other side. And there's just never going to be any cooperation. I mean, if there's only name calling involved, first of all, that's only going to upset some people, and that's going to increase violence. But then it's also just there's no way of having a consensus. Like, I mean, Congress is divided and doesn't work for a million reasons that have nothing to do with that. But, I mean, that's the way I see the future of Congress being, right? Everyone's going to be really radical. Everybody's not going to want to conform. And, if you don't fit what I believe, you're an idiot. I don't want to talk to you. We're going to keep trying to pass our thing, and it's never going to pass because there's too many things you need to do that require at least some semblance of cooperation. So I guess that goes back to my thing. That's why I see our like republic, our United States democracy, at least deteriorating in some level, if it's not collapsing. I mean, I won't go that far, but like it's already on the track of deteriorating. People already are already idolized. I mean, you have to say Trump. Hillary wasn't really idolized, but Bernie was idolized, the populist version, and still is. And Trump. I mean, he is he is idolized by a lot of people.
Yeah, he's the God Emperor. I mean, that's kind of facetious, but still, like a lot of people believe that.
But there's some people, they'll stand by Trump no matter what he says. Yeah, and that's not. That fits the mold of like the people that loved Caesar. That fits the mold of the people that loved Augustus. Like they didn't care about hearing about the little scandals and stuff that they did on the side, because as long as they're feeling happy, they're doing what they want. They don't care. They don't care about democracy and stuff. And I just think it's going off of that. I think it's crazy that people think that the Electoral College. This could be another topic for another day.
Yeah.
But I do think that like it's crazy off that trend that like this is the worst time for us to get rid of the Electoral College. Yeah. Because it's about the only thing that keeps any sort of stability for a general elections. Because I can't even imagine what the swing voting would be like with that system.
Oh my God, dude, that'd be crazy.
But
all right. Let's see.
Let's see.
All right, so that's about it.
I think that wraps up that topic.
Yeah.
Hope you guys enjoyed listening to us.
Thanks for coming all the way through. Yeah.
Even if you didn't come all the way through, we still thank you for listening to parts of it. But we're excited to be doing this. This is our first video. We're going to get better and better every time. We're we're planning on doing everything and trying to be focused and do a microscopic and macroscopic view of everything, both in the foreign policy world, domestic sphere. Like today was more of a domestic. It was kind of a mix, I guess.
Yeah, a bit of mix.
But
also historical topics,
and then some fun, like historical topics.
Maybe some miscellaneous thing, talking about theories or whatever.
Yeah, just let us know, guys, what you think. First of all, let us know what you think about this video.
Yes, please.
Any comments? We'll engage with you if you want to have a little comment debates. Feel free to engage in your own comment debates. I won't yell at you about your rhetoric or anything like that.
Hey, if you want to come on the podcast, feel free to ask.
Yeah, feel free to ask. We're planning to do some larger debates with multiple people about subjects because we think that'd be really fun, that style. So we'll try and do that at least once a month. But yeah, if you have any recommendations in any of those forms, just let us know. Hope you enjoy the first one.
All right, thank you.
Thanks.
This has been Luke and Michael. See you later, guys.